Sanskrit words. Yoga is a Sanskrit word. Vinyasa is a Sanskrit word. Hatha is a Sanskrit word. Hatha means like push and pull, sun and moon. It's this opposing forces. I'm pulling myself into a stretch, but there's also a resistance that's pulling me out of it. So I'm playing with these opposing forces. That's Hatha. Vinyasa is like a flowing. So one pose, I exhale and it brings me into another pose. And I inhale and it brings me to another pose. And so it's this like progression of postures that's linked with a breathing pattern. And that's a vinyasa. That's a method of Hatha yoga. And then yoga is what we're talking about. What is yoga? What does yoga mean? Strictly on the most, if you ask a first-year physical therapy student, what is physical therapy, they'll tell you one thing. If you ask somebody that's about to go into physical therapy school, you ask them what's PT, they'll tell you one thing. You ask a doctor of PT what it is, they'll tell you another thing. You ask a senior guy who's on his deathbed, who's been practicing PT all his life, he'll tell you another thing. And so there's a depth of experience. You ask the guy that originated PT, the first person who ever used the word PT, he'll probably say something different than 500 years from now what they call PT. And the most senior yoga practitioners who have been doing it the longest, who have studied a lineage of teachers before them that also studied it for a long time, so that you can gather knowledge from the experience of others. What they say yoga is the stopping of mind. That when mind stops, you achieve yoga. That doesn't mean you die, it just means you stop. Just stop. And you get glimpses of that all the time. So you gain the reference for what that is when you practice yoga, and then you start to notice moments of yoga in regular living. And it's a pleasurable thing to kind of stop mind. Like when you stop twitching. There's twitching in the mind. The mind is twitching too. Just because the body's not twitching, the mind has these little ticks that we're keeping ourselves occupied. One of the really big clues to that is when you're clenching your tongue. When the tongue is clenching on the roof of the mouth or suctioning against the teeth, that's a mind activity. The tongue wouldn't do that unless the mind was telling it to. So there's all kinds of internal clenches and twitches. When you start stilling those, whittling those out, you start to notice what remains. And you just keep removing excess activity, inefficient activity. What remains is getting closer and closer and closer to yoga is the stopping of mind activity. I hope you found that helpful. Silent flute, you go to ninthland.com and you sign up for the silent flute, and that's weekly training that we go way deeper into this sort of subject. This is a beginner introduction to what is yoga. Just wanted to talk about it for a minute. Namaste.